A Bugatti Chiron that arrived in 2 pieces 14 months ago just drove under its own power, and that sentence contains more weight than it first appears to carry. Not moved forward on a dolly, not rolled downhill with someone guiding the wheel. Driven, by Matt, under its own W16 engine, through a gearbox bracket welded by a man called Bob, cooled by Honda Civic radiator cores, protected by a crash bar fabricated from scratch in 60 hours from the ruins of the original. Bugatti's own official channel published a video calling this car a write-off. The VIN got locked, the car came here destroyed, in 2 separate pieces, and 14 months later, Matt drove it down the road. Temperature held across the run. The gearbox bracket passed every load it faced. The Honda Civic cores moved heat away from a 16-cylinder engine without complaint. Bob's crash bar bolted up on the first attempt with 0 measurements taken beforehand, which is the kind of thing that only happens when the person fabricating it actually knows what they're doing. That moment needed to land before anything else gets discussed, because what comes next is the remaining 1%, and that 1% is not a single clean task sitting neatly in a to-do list. It breaks into 5 separate obstacles, each one carrying its own timeline, each one with its own specific complication, and each one standing between this car and a UK number plate. Some of them will take hours, one will consume weeks, and one of them, the obstacle with no mechanical solution, no forum answer, no cross-reference, and no workaround that 14 months of creative sourcing has been able to uncover, could delay this entire rebuild by months rather than weeks. All 5 get covered here: what each one actually is, how long each one realistically takes, and which one sits completely outside of Matt's control. Starting with the easiest, because that's the only sensible place to begin. When Matt split the Chiron chassis to access the gearbox, a sensor got trapped during reassembly. The process involved a 2-post lift and bin wheels, and somewhere in putting everything back together, that sensor ended up wedged between the 2 chassis sections and twisted roughly 90 degrees out of its correct mounting position. Accessing it now means reopening that gap just far enough. A few bolts loosened on both sides simultaneously to create the clearance needed to free it and rotate it back into alignment. A full chassis split isn't on the cards. The entire bin wheel process doesn't need repeating. What the job actually requires is a morning of careful work, and Matt's own read on it is direct. Mistakes happen during a rebuild of this complexity, the time is available, and it will be filmed on the 2nd channel. The sensor itself is a standard Volkswagen Group unit that runs across multiple platforms in the range, available at regular parts pricing if the twist turned out to cause any damage. Obstacle 1 sits comfortably in the hours column. The pyrofuse is more interesting than its name suggests. In a serious collision, the same impact that triggers the airbags also detonates the pyrofuse, which physically cuts the connection between the battery and every electrical system in the car. The entire point is fire risk reduction, and on the Chiron that unit sits just above the battery tucked beneath the carbon monocoque. Matt found a Mercedes unit, cross-referenced the specification against the Chiron's requirements, confirmed the fit, and installed it. The diagnostic system came back with a fault code: fuse resistance reading too low. The fuse itself hasn't blown, and the car starts and runs, but an active fault sits in the airbag system right now and isn't going anywhere on its own. Matt's working theory is that the fuse has moved into a degraded state, technically intact but no longer producing the correct resistance reading that the system expects to see. The fix is not complicated in isolation. Order a replacement unit, fit it, confirm the fault code clears. What elevates this beyond a straightforward part swap is where it sits in the sequence that follows. An active airbag fault code at IVA, which is the individual vehicle approval test this Chiron must pass before it receives road registration, is a direct fail point. Inspectors check that safety systems are functional, and a fault code sitting in the airbag system is a safety system that cannot be confirmed as functional under any reading of the assessment criteria. The pyrofuse gets resolved before IVA gets booked. Full stop. Obstacle 2 lands in the days column, gated behind a parts order. Panels and paint is the most visually obvious thing left on the car, and it carries more complexity than a straightforward respray usually does. The rear bumper is already on. The rear quarters are still carrying the original dark blue from before the crash, which sits against the purple and white interior like it belongs to a completely different car. The roof panel needs painting. The front end, which Matt confirmed on the 2nd channel, is not being reused in standard form, and is being created separately rather than sourced as a replacement original. E3 Customs, the same team who built the purple and white split interior, the diamond pattern stitching across the seats, and the gold bronze trim throughout the cabin, are involved in the paint process. Matt hasn't revealed the color. What he has confirmed is that the rear quarters, the roof, and several other panels are heading to paint, and whatever color is coming was specifically chosen to sit alongside everything already inside this car. The timeline for panels and paint runs in weeks rather than months, but the front end introduces a layer of uncertainty because a non-standard front end, one that did not leave the Bugatti factory in its current designed form, needs to be manufactured, fitted, and locked into its final position before the car can present for paint in the configuration it will carry to IVA, and that front end connects directly into Obstacle 4. Individual vehicle approval is the process a vehicle must pass to receive registration in the UK when standard manufacturer type approval doesn't cover it. A salvage title, Chiron, rebuilt independently, carrying non-standard components and a documented crash history, does not receive a number plate through a standard DVLA application. IVA covers brakes, steering, lighting systems, emissions, structural integrity, and a complete confirmation that no warning lights are active and every safety system reads as fully functional. That means obstacles 1, 2, and 3 all feed directly into this stage. The sensor fault needs to be gone, the pyrofuse fault needs to be gone, panels and the front end need to be in their final confirmed configuration. But this car carries one additional layer at the IVA stage that a straightforward rebuilt vehicle doesn't face. When a car presents for IVA with bodywork that wasn't part of the original manufacturer type approval, the inspector has to assess those panels independently, covering structural integrity, lighting positions, and bumper impact geometry as a separate part of the process. A Chiron with a front end repaired or replaced in kind would be a clean presentation. A Chiron with a front end redesigned from scratch requires that additional layer of assessment, and the inspector's findings on those panels feed directly into whether the car passes. The pace at which the front end is being progressed suggests it's already been designed with IVA compliance built into every decision, but until it's revealed, fitted, and confirmed on the car, Obstacle 4 cannot be fully booked, and Obstacle 4 cannot happen at all until Obstacle 5 gets resolved. The BCM is the one Matt cannot fix himself, and that distinction matters because for 14 months, every other impossible-sounding problem found a solution somewhere. The body control module is the electronic brain of the Chiron, and it recorded the crash. Sitting in this car right now, it's in a post-accident state, with certain systems locked into degraded mode and fault codes active that no independent diagnostic tool can reach or clear. Resetting the BCM, wiping the crash data, and returning the car's electronic architecture to a post-repair state requires Bugatti's proprietary diagnostic system, known as Leonardo. Leonardo exists only at authorized Bugatti service centers, and not because independent replication is technically beyond anyone. Bugatti encrypted the reset protocol. The decryption key sits inside their authorized network, and outside that network, independent tools can read what the codes say but cannot touch them. In 14 months, Matt sourced Audi airbags, Honda Civic radiator cores, a Volkswagen diesel starter motor, Amazon bolts, Porsche crash sensors, a Lamborghini Gallardo fuse board, and a Mercedes Pyro fuse. No cross-reference exists for a BCM reset. The forum thread with the answer doesn't exist. No workaround has surfaced anywhere. The only available path runs through Bugatti itself, the same Bugatti that locked the VIN, the same Bugatti whose channel said this rebuild was finished before it started. Matt has to approach them, request a diagnostic session, and trust that somewhere in their authorized network, a technician who has followed these videos will agree to do it. What shifts the calculation is a specific date. July 31st, 2026, the EU Right to Repair Directive comes into force, and software techniques that block independent repair become prohibited under that legislation. A BCM reset accessible only through manufacturer-controlled proprietary software is directly addressed by what that directive covers. Bugatti's legal team has read the directive, and they understand exactly what it means for their position. The realistic path to Obstacle 5 being resolved isn't a formal statement from Bugatti corporate. It's a UK dealer quietly booking the car in, a technician running the reset, and the car leaving with the BCM cleared and no public acknowledgement attached to any of it. That's where corporate legal positions and ground-level decisions separate, and most technicians, given an actual choice, land on the right side of it. If that doesn't happen before July 31st, the legislation converts it from a voluntary decision into a legal requirement. Obstacle 1, sensor repositioning, measured in hours. Obstacle 2, pyrofuse replacement, measured in days. Obstacle 3, panels and paint, measured in weeks. Obstacle 4, IVA, depends on 1 through 3 plus the BCM clearing first. Obstacle 5, the BCM reset, sits somewhere between weeks and months, and nobody outside Bugatti's network controls which end of that range it lands on. The car that came here in 2 pieces 14 months ago is 5 things away from a number plate, and 4 of those 5 things remain in Matt's hands. Bob's bracket held under a W16, Civic Core's cooled a Chiron, a crash bar built from a destroyed original bolted up first time. Matt drove a car Bugatti declared finished. 4 obstacles his, 1 of them theirs. The question was never whether the BCM gets cleared. The only question is whether it happens before July 31st or after, and your answer to that tells you exactly how closely you've been watching this from the beginning.